Hi everyone, this is Josh Stella from Fugue, and this is the first time we've done one of these, but we're going to do more of them. This is a short video talking about the masterclass we just did, summarizing it a bit, and in this case, making one correction because I forgot to tell you something. So, for summary, on the screen you can see the 5 layers of access. And I really, when you're thinking about S3, I want you to think about these 5 layers. As some of our attendees attested to, there are some other things you can think about too, but the goal here is for you to have a mental model that's manageable and that's practical and that gets you to having secure S3. So our 5 layers are ACLs, bucket policies, IAM policies, access points, and block public access. Now I've got arrows here on the whiteboard from the session on the 2 that we're going to focus on because I believe they're the most fundamentally important ones. Most of the rest of these, the other access points and block public access, have very good uses. Block public access, you're probably going to use that a lot. It's not a silver bullet. You still have to understand bucket policies and IAM policies. Access points are for a pretty specific kind of use case, right? Where you have multiple classes of users with different permissions and you don't want one big long bucket policy. You want to separate those concerns even though it's a single S3 bucket. So those are both things that you'll use. ACLs, as I said in the class, I would avoid. And AWS tells you to avoid them as well. So just a reminder, the 5 layers of security on S3 and the 2 you should really focus on up front, you can do a whole lot with just these 2. If you understand them properly, are your bucket policies and your IAM policies. A reminder on what we're talking about in terms of the actual functioning on the cloud. Okay, so I'm going to scroll down a little here on the whiteboard. We're talking about principles, being able to perform actions on resources. There is one other concept that we didn't get into a whole lot called the context, which is when a principal tries to do an action on a resource, what IP address do they have? What are the other credentials they're carrying with them? What time is it? So context does matter too, but we can kind of add that in later. The important thing here is understanding principles, actions, and resources, okay? So the mistake I made is in the second use case we talked about. The second use case was I have a program over here on my whiteboard, in this case, an EC2 instance, but it could be a container or a Lambda or even a mobile app. But it's a programmatic principle. It's a program, an application that needs to read and write to an S3 bucket, and that should be a highly protected S3 bucket that only that application can talk to, and maybe an admin. But we're going to simplify it to just the application. So the way we did this is we created an IAM role called S3 read write. Here I'm highlighting it on the screen. And S3 read write says anything who has this IAM role can talk to anything in S3 with these list of actions. And in this case, it's things like list and read and write actions, hence S3 read write. But we actually, so that we have that one IAM role that grants a bunch of actions. And we know that AWS by default denies all actions. So we've granted those. So we have a hole through the policies to get to what we want to do. But what we really want to do here is we don't want to restrict actions differently. We want certain principles to only be able to talk to certain resources using those actions. You might think, well, I can write a whole bunch of IAM rules that are limited to the resources and appropriate principles. Well, then you get another problem, which is proliferation of IAM policies. And that actually is a security issue in and of itself, because you're going to lose track of them. The world's going to change. You're going to move on. And you really want a manageable set of things. That should be constantly in your mind when you're thinking about cloud security. So the mistake I made was I applied a bucket policy. Oh, by the way, we're talking about this EC2 instance should be able to talk to this S3 bucket, but this one with the same IAM role, right here, S3 read write. This guy's got, this guy's got S3 read write. They have the same IAM permissions, but what we really want to say is because this one is in the actual production VPC for the application, and this one is not, right? Not in the right VPC, legit app instance. We want this guy to be able to talk to this S3 bucket and this one not to, even though they have the same IAM role. This is where bucket policies are your friend. So what we showed you, I got to get to the right screen here. Here we go. Is this IAM bucket policy. It's saying deny everything. Deny, the effect is deny. The principal is all principals, any actors. The actions are everything on S3, right? S3 star. And the resource is the important records bucket, unless they are coming from this VPC endpoint and have a source IP address in this address range. Okay, so that's how we're choking back down. We've opened up S3 read write, we're choking it back down with the bucket policy. But when I demoed that, I didn't show you everything in the terminal I should have. Okay, so I'm going to do that now. So here you can see 10.0.0.208, and I've got another shell open into 172.31.30.179. All right, let's just make sure I'm telling you the truth about these. These are actually these instances. Come on, you. And here you can see this is that 10.0.0.208 on its private IP. And here you can see this is 172.31.30.179. So these are the two instances I've logged into. All right, so let's go to the one that is the one we want to have access, and we'll do an AWS S3 list. Okay, I did this in the presentation, and then I did the same thing on this one. And so far they look the same, and I stopped there, and that was where I made my error, because what you really need to see is one more step. Okay, I need to look at the actual important records. And here I can find them. I'm just going to copy paste this. I'm copying and pasting because I switched keyboards recently because of wrist stress and so on to one of these, and I end up with a lot of typos still. It's awesome, by the way, but if you want one, what are they called? Highly recommend. Truly ergonomic. Really, really cool. A lot less wrist strain, but I'm still making typos. All right, so I'm just going to copy paste that over. I'm going to try. Now this is the one that shouldn't have access, and I get an access denied. Okay, so that bucket policy is working. I didn't demo that all the way through to the end in the presentation. I apologize for that, but that's what's going to happen. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, wait a minute, that bucket policy said deny everything on important records. That would mean that over here, all of these actions against that resource are denied unless you're in the right VPC coming through the right VPC endpoint. By the way, the endpoint that we're referring to is right here hanging on that VPC, right? So each VPC that has a endpoint connection to S3 will have its own endpoint you can target. All right, so why can I even see the name important records when I do a list? The reason is simple but inobvious. So certain actions apply not to individual resources, but actually at the service level. So there is an action, and the way to learn the actions is to go create a new IAM policy and select a service, and you'll get a nice enumeration of the actions. And you can also look in the docs. There's lots of them. S3 has about 100. One of those is list buckets. Now, when you think about list buckets, that's not mapped to a particular bucket. It's the service. So our bucket policy on that particular resource of important records isn't going to block that. Okay. So thank you again. I got to tell you, it is just such fun to hang out with you folks and do these classes with you. We're going to be coming out with a lot more content. We're really pleased that folks seem to be enjoying these. Lots more nerdy backgrounds to guess and win prizes. And you'll see a lot more from Fugue. So, oh, that reminded me. You'll see a lot more from Fugue. We added some cool stuff. I'm just going to show you really quick. Okay. Here I'm back at the Fugue console. And I want to show you this really cool new feature. Oh, I kind of zoomed past one of them while I was doing this. We now have this ability to do like full dashboards of data for all your stuff in Fugue, which is super cool, I think. Rule violations by severity, etc., by service, your burn down, compliance percentages, etc., etc. We've got a whole data warehouse. So we just rolled that out. And then the other thing I want to show you is this guy. So here I've gone into Fugue, I've run a compliance report, and I'm doing it by resource, right? So instead of like by the control, like the rule or a resource type, I'm looking at each individual resource. And here I can see I've got a demo app table in DynamoDB that says it's non-compliant. Well, what I've done here is, let me just delete one of these and I'll rebuild it. I've waived it. So you might say, for example, like a DynamoDB table, according to Fugue, the point in time recovery should be enabled. Well, maybe this DynamoDB table is essentially an ephemeral cache and you don't care. You don't care about recovery. So you want to not hear about that anymore. So let's name this, we don't need no stinking point in time recovery. And we'll say ephemeral data. So you give it a name, you give it a comment, and then you just say create a rule waiver. And now we're not going to complain about that to you anymore because that table actually doesn't need point in time recovery. When you think about our first use case we did, that was, that first use case we did was a public S3 bucket. So I've gone on a little longer than I wanted to, but I hope this is helpful. Let us know what you want us to cover. And again, thanks so much.